So I'm going to do a bit of journalism here on these guys. Timothy, Steve, I love you. Big fan. But you don't understand the tech. So I'm going to fill in some blanks here. Hopefully we can get in front of your eyes and, connect it to some current events that are going on and a bit of history as well. And they do excellent on the history part. But again, I understand it's like a timed thing sometimes. Like they couldn't really go into it. I'm going to add in as we go along like we've all done before. All right, so let's just hang out for a little bit.
Every major political movement in this country has been predicated upon working class and lower middle class people. It just has. That's the power. Trump understands it. That's his audience. That's why I say mass communication. He understands how to have a emotional but also mental connection with a mass audience, working class. The Democratic Party has abandoned the working class. What they are is you have these billionaires at the top, the Wall Street guys, the Silicon Valley guys. Then you have the credentialed class. All these people with college degrees and Ivy League degrees are sitting there like on MSNBC telling you the way things are going to be. And then they have a kind of a mass of the poor right below the working. They've abandoned the working class to us. This project on populist nationalism I've been working on for 15 years, 14 or 15 years, and they seeded the ground. It wasn't that hard because if you go after and present yourself as somebody that could potentially be a solutions provider or at least prepared to listen, the working class is looking for solutions. They're looking for people to listen to them. That's what Trump stepped in. He changed the Republican Party from a country club party to a party of working class people in under 10 years. From the time I met him in 2010 to 2000, and he really started getting really involved in probably 2012, 13. In 10 or 12 years, he totally changed a party to be a working class party because in one.
Wasn't just him. Ron Paul kicked it off in 2008. All right, and he was the most censored candidate. He paved the fucking way for the Tea Party to later come, and he's basically the godfather of the Tea Party, and I was a part of that movement back when it was going on. And another thing too, when he's talking about like the Democrats, how they used to be part of, and they had the credentialed class and everything else. So now we're finding out with the USAID money how that was all structured, that they were all getting paid off to warp our fucking reality, including these the credentialed class, which that goes all the way back to the '60s, getting these Marxists in on the institutions and everything else, and then creating this negative feedback loop that goes right down to us regular people, working class, to warp how we even perceive our country and the economy and everything else, and all the misinformation, disinformation that they've been practicing for a long time. And it all comes out of the CIA, financed by the Federal Reserve System, which Ron Paul was the one who started bringing that into the national discussion in 2008.
One of the big things, the Democrats just ceded it to us. They didn't try to fight it. They're not trying to fight it today. The people that actually speak about populism, Ro Khanna, who's very smart, talking about economic patriotism, or Fetterman, they're kind of on an island. You don't
They're
see
marginalized.
They're marginalized. You don't see them. I keep telling them, I said, you don't see them. It's one thing to talk populism, another thing to get into it. You don't see those guys on MSNBC every night. You don't see them talked about pushed every day in Democratic circles. And these are the guys that are at least trying to come up with working class and populist solutions, and they're kind of on an island right now. The Democratic Party has just totally ceded because that credentialed class, they're too precious to want to, get down and kind of deal with working class issues.
Why did Bernie Sanders, who had a similar position on immigration at one point to yours, maybe not exactly similar. I don't know.
No, I had it totally similar.
It was very similar.
We just lifted Bernie Sanders' shit. I mean, come on, we just took it. He was 100%.
He said open borders is a Koch brothers proposal. Like that's something they wanted.
Cato, yes, he understood that.
And he understood they wanted to drive down wages. At what point, and Bill Clinton said similar things.
Because Bill Clinton, remember, the Clinton's power all came from the white working class. That's how they survived that's how they survived in Arkansas. That's how he won the presidency. And that's how Hillary Clinton.
Not to mention the fact that he was literally involved with the CIA and training the Sandinistas in Mena, Arkansas, to go down to Nicaragua to fight the communists, which really, is a big play by United Fruit and a whole bunch of other things to secure that region for all their fucking exports. It's a big fucking scam. And how were they financing that whole thing? Well, that ties into the drug trafficking that was going on. So all these partnerships with all the cartels and even the mafia back in like the 40s and whatnot when they helped us get into Sicily. Like these triads between politics and the black market and the intelligence agencies. It's just been going on for a long time. And yeah, he's right. They did have a power base with white working class and everything, but again with the U.S. aid money, and that's been going on for decades now. It's an entire machine that was built to warp our reality with these fucking puppets that they put in as members of basically the intelligence apparatus.
Clinton saved herself, at least for a while, against Obama
Right.
when Obama ran the tables on her in the primary in 2008.
What changed in the Democratic Party that
The
made,
cultural of it, the cultural issues overwhelmed it, and that's why Bernie Sanders never had a shot. As soon as look, the capitalist today, the whole invasion of the 10 to 12 million, and I'm just talking about people that came from January 20th, 2021, when Biden took office till Trump.
right?
That's a 10 to 12 million people. That was the Koch kind of corporate class, the Chamber of Commerce guys with the open borders people. But what they did is they wanted to kill inflation by flooding the zone with low-skilled workers. I mean, the Federal Reserve was very open about this. They said they were going to do this. This is how we're going to, and they did it, that 10 to 12 million. Well, Bernie Sanders, you can't defend American workers. You can't defend American citizens of every ethnicity and race until you're prepared to go hardcore in immigration. You can't have the world come here to your own country that your family's been here for generations, busting their ass to make this country better and to make the communities better, and have the world come in here and compete with you, not just with the low skilled jobs, but also with the phoniness of the H-1B visas, and that we don't really have any legal immigration in this country. It's all a scam.
And one thing I want to add in here, when people talk about, well, your family came here, whatever else, understand the times upon which they did come here. Like a lot of people came during the middle of the 1800s. What was going on? We had Manifest Destiny, where we were doing westward expansion all the way to the Pacific. There was a lot of land availability, a lot of building that need to be done, so they could spread out all throughout the United States. And this happened in several waves of immigration that came through. They were able to move westward and spread out. Of course, there was concentrations, like Northeast is like metropolis. Everything's a city. From fucking New York all the way up to New Hampshire. Point is, they swamped us within 4 years, and we don't have the infrastructure at all to take care of them. And we know now how it was done. They money laundered to these NGOs to traffic these people in, partnering up with the fucking cartels to help the CIA. And partially, a lot of these countries where they're coming from are countries that the CIA broke. Ha!
So
It's
the
all a
H-1B
scam.
visa, and I wanted to talk to you about
it's
that.
depressed wages. The whole thing's
Yeah.
It is to depress wages. I totally agree with you. But here's the deal. We need to have this tactic in our back pocket. Is there a lot of fraudulent activity with the H-1B visas and the green card and all this? Yes, of course. It's a government program. There's going to be corruption. We need to have that tactic in order to maintain an edge in technology or whatever else. He is correct that, if you can source American labor first, you should. Absolutely. No one disagrees with that. But at the end of that, you need to have this tactic in your back pocket just in case. Or even to do a strategic attack against a certain nation that is, burgeoning in whatever tech or whatever else, that you can just poach these people, bring them here, give them a good deal, and then that's it. And Trump's now charging $5 million for, the gold package, which is a brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant. He's probably going to do a silver package as well, and then the green cards are just for, your average yokels,
depressed wages,
And
and they're winning.
you were
And this is
saying-
why Bernie. This
Yeah.
is why Bernie. I say Bernie Sanders. The reason people say was Bernie's a fucking pussy.
Yeah.
He had 2 shots at the Clintons. The Clintons are the epitome of the neoliberal neocon globalist. okay? And they're like the mafia, right? These are hard people. There's nobody harder than Hillary Clinton.
CIA. It's not the mafia. Well, they are partners, with the black market interlopers.
She's tough.
She's
Okay,
tough.
he had 2 shots at her.
Yeah.
I got brought into the campaign not because I knew anything about politics. I'd never been in a campaign office in my life, but I had focused for a couple of years working with Peter Schweitzer and other people on taking down the Clintons. I got brought in because they were so far behind that they needed somebody to. If you were going to win, you had to bring Clinton's numbers down because President Trump at that time, candidate Trump, you could argue anywhere from 8 to 14 points down in mid-August of 2016. To close that gap, you got to bring the heat on Hillary Clinton, and I was brought in as that because I knew the Clintons. And Bernie Sanders, I keep telling people, he had 2 shots at her, never laid a glove on. It was a pillow fight.
Right.
If you're going to get those people, you got to get up in their grill and rip their face off because they're tough and they're neoliberal neocons. They're very vulnerable. But Bernie had kind of ceded that ground. That's why he's not really had much of an impact on this populist. Think about it. We've had a populist nationalist revolt in this country, and Bernie Sanders has been a marginal figure to it. How did that work? And in the Democratic Party today, this is why Ro Khanna and Fetterman are kind of on an island. They don't really have a huge constituency in the Democratic Party.
What, in your
Probably
estimation,
the least corrupt.
You talk about as the age of Trump, which is clearly the age of Trump. You said it started in 2008 with the Tea Party, with the bailouts. This is, I think I've heard you say something like this, that
they never give Ron Paul his fucking due, and it pisses me off.
The financial collapse.
The financial collapse. You had
financial collapse of
Obama's administration, largely chosen by Citigroup.
Yep.
He had a lot of people brought in from the financial sector. And what do you think the response from the Democratic Party should have been?
Well, first off, you should have put these things, and look, it would take steel balls, but you had to do it. Number one, we should have let Goldman Sachs go bankrupt. We should have let AIG go bankrupt.
Their argument would be that the entire global economy would collapse. I mean, this is what they were saying to me. I was in that business many years ago, and they were saying, they were coming into our office going, if these bailouts are not signed, the American economy falls, and then the world economy falls within 3 days.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that was...
No, it's 100% true. We know that from congressional...
And now we're in the everything bubble in every single asset class, the commercial real estate market, and we see these bubbles getting popped right now. Like, just think about all these federal buildings that, we are maintaining even though they're completely empty. Now they're selling, they're canceling the leases or selling the buildings. That's just letting slowly popping that bubble of commercial real estate. And remember, the banks, $500 billion in unrealized losses that are going on now. You see all the economic data in the Kobayashi letter that I keep reposting to my wall of all these awful, horrific things that are going on. Car delinquencies, mortgage delinquencies. Things are at just record levels. And remember what Trump was saying. He wants Jerome Powell to lower interest rates at a time of record inflation. And what lowering interest rates does is floods the economy with more easy money while BRICS are abandoning the dollar. Okay, and then this is all just awful things that are going on right now. And that's they talk about the 2008 financial crisis, but they never even go into Bitcoin and how that was launched subsequent to all of that. And of course, the blockchain patents go back to the 80s and the NSA and everything else. So we don't know who the fuck Satoshi is, and he has this huge bag out there. Remember, if we don't know who it is, and they contain that huge bag that could crash the value, why would we ever allow this fucking thing into our strategic reserve? It's a gun to everybody's head. That's the point. And now we have the Biden missing bag of Bitcoin. Apparently, someone just walked off with it. They can track it on chain, but it goes to anonymous sources, which is another thing that needs to be mentioned here, because after the 2008 financial crisis, we saw an explosion in like terroristic activity all across the world. We had the bombings in Yemen. We had Libya going down, Syria, and we took out Libya because Gaddafi wanted to do the gold reserve for the North African countries. with the whole Benghazi thing, it's running guns and everything. So they had to it's now panic. It's now panic in the intelligence agencies, which supports the Fed, giving the dollar out to all these countries, making them use it to keep the scam alive. That we're going to give you paper for your minerals. So they had to find a way to move this value across border for all of these dark fucking things that are going on from the CIA intelligence agencies to finance coups, assassinations, whatever else. Thus Bitcoin. Because they printed out so much to bail out all these fucking people and to keep the scam alive. But you need the element of force on the ground to force these sovereign nations to then keep taking the dollar. So they had to pay them off somehow, and they had to move it across borders. What's a better way than Bitcoin? There is no other better way if you don't want to touch the banks for all this dark money shit. Now, XRP is a clean ledger. It settles in 3 to 5 seconds. Better than Bitcoin, but I think this is the important but here, is that criminals don't care. They just want to settle anonymously. So they were glad that they didn't no longer have to truck, dollar bills or gold bars, whatever way to anonymously transfer value. They were happy with just using Bitcoin because they'll wait the hour or two to settle. Because before that, it was like, okay, now it's a whole fucking process of, bringing this value cross borders, and then it could be seized at any point in time if they get caught by the good elements in the government, right? So now they're using fucking Bitcoin. It's not, or any of these other unregulated blockchains.
Testimony at the banking committee is that so they put Lehman Brothers into bankruptcy on Monday, I think the 15th, in London first, put it in bankruptcy, and they didn't realize Lehman Brothers was the center of the commercial paper market, which is what funds companies overnight for the cash, because guys are not sitting there with liquid cash to run their operations, right? They have investments or bonds or whatever. The commercial paper market freezes. All of a sudden, you got everybody in a free fall.
Right.
And on Thursday, Hank Paulson, who I used to work for at Goldman, and Bernanke, the head of the Federal Reserve, Secretary of Treasury, go to Bush's office, into the Oval Office, and they say, hey, look, we need $1 trillion cash infusion by 5 o'clock, or the American financial system will collapse in 72 hours, and the world financial system 2 days later. And Bush, in a profile in Courage, goes, hey, we checked the Constitution. It's not my problem. You got to go see this lady named Nancy Pelosi. Only they have the ability to kind of unlock, to print that kind of money, or to
best stock trader of all time.
to authorize that. They go up to Nancy Pelosi, and this is what the system's like. There's a guy in Alabama that was he was the minority side, the Republicans in the House on the banking committee. They made everybody put their Blackberries and everything outside. This guy, when they get out and talk about this, he texts his brokers and say, buy the QQQs, short the market for tomorrow morning at the open. Yeah, he made a couple $100,000.
Is in your mind, is that a coup?
Well, no, here's what it is that you got to have some accountability and responsibility. First, you got to keep your head clear,
right,
and say, well, hang on, because what Hank Paulson did is took care of Goldman. They were in the boardroom they were in the conference rooms of Sullivan and Cromwell at that time preparing the bankruptcy of Goldman Sachs.
Right.
They were in the conference rooms preparing the bankruptcy of GE Capital. They were in the rooms in the conference room of the big white shoe law firms preparing the bankruptcy of AIG. I mean, these companies were going down. What they did on Goldman Sachs is that they signed a one-line thing that said, starting Monday, Goldman Sachs is a bank holding company, right? They just made it a bank holding company with one line, and so come Monday morning, they could go to the Fed window and borrow at 2%, lend it to their clients at 4%, and take that VIG. That VIG would be a couple $1 billion a month. That would kind of bail them out. They got a bailout. All these, every one of GE Capital, Merrill Lynch, all of them got bailouts.
And this is all on the backs of the taxpayer.
Inflation is a tax.
But the little guy, $35,000. The little guy. First off, the little guy didn't get a bailout. Worse, Hispanic and Black, particularly working class, where the guys got wiped out of their equity in their homes, right? Because all the CMOs, all the mortgage packages collapsed. So guys they just blow them out, turn it over to the banks. The banks walked in and were picking these things up for 50 cents of the dollar. Not that they wanted them at the time, but the equity holders, you had a generation of particularly minority homeowners that got zeroed out. My point is that yes, there probably had to be some bailouts, but not the way it's done. And people say, well, Bannon, why are you talking about it? Because the way we put this money in, they got recouped and got like 12%. I said, yo, dude, at Goldman Sachs, if companies in trouble like that,
yeah,
you walk in, you blow out management, you blow out the equity, you lend them the money, the new management team gets to earn into 20% of the equity, and then the guys that put the money up get a bunch of warrants. Where's the warrant package for the little guy? Go back to 2008.
There are no guarantees for the American taxpayer.
Nothing, zero. They got paid back the money
yeah.
and they got some returns, but what you should have gotten is some sort of package to own. You should have owned these companies. I would even say quasi-nationalize the banks. They proved that they were incapable.
You make a lot of people in this town nervous when the way you
more
talk.
on Wall Street. Yes.
Well, that's what I mean. But I mean, like,
fuck them. You got if you're not making them nervous, you're not doing your job. The whole game is is totally rigged. It's completely rigged against the little guy. The little guy. At the same time, they went to Silicon Valley and did a deal with the oligarchs. The little guy in this country, and this is a revolt. The guy making $45,000 a year, right? The entire world's system rests on his shoulders. Okay, not just the American economy and paying the taxes here, but the kind of the post-war international rules-based order, which is if you look at the Eurasian landmass from Western Europe and NATO to the Middle East, Persian Gulf, to around the Straits of Malacca and South China Sea, up to Japan, around the rim of the Eurasian landmass, you have these four big nodes. And there you have commercial relationships, capital markets, trade deals, which were upside down on everyone on. You have some sort of a little bit of cultural back and forth, but you have an American security guarantee. It's the reason our defense budget is $1 trillion. So
it's the reason our dollar has value.
It has value, but that dollar during the yes, we're the
because we are the enforcement mechanism, as well as with the CIA keeping the scam going by blackmail, whatever else, etc. ad nauseum.
Reserve currency after Bretton Woods, and that's how you have to. We took it over from the Brits. That's how you run an empire. We were a hegemon, at least for a moment in time. But the question now, because of the drop in purchasing power, the inverse of inflation, over Biden's thing, this is why you have the BRICS nations saying, "Hey, maybe we got to get on a different system." Maybe
Tell people the BRICS nations are.
BRICS are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It started with that. These nations that have natural resources that were kind of binding together, saying, "Hey, the West, right, really Western Europe, and particularly the United States, are screwing us, right? We are selling them their natural resources at dollars, and these dollars are depreciated over time. They're doing a devaluation on us."
And SWIFT is used to pass the sanctions upon them to stop their ability to transact for whatever they need for their people and their country to survive. So all of that really got kicked off because we kicked Russia out of the SWIFT system. They backed their shit by gold, and then the whole BRICS thing came together, and that thing in October, the summit, they all said it. They're going to be settling in their own currencies, which gets rid of the idea of a centralized reserve. And there's only a few technologies that even have the capability to do it. Then the leading candidate for that is XRP and Ripple. So you need to, Stephen, you need to do some research into what Ripple is and what XRP is. You're a finance guy. You understand that settlement times is one of the biggest hurdles we have today, because 3 to 5 days to settle between these different currencies, a lot can happen in these nations in 3 to 5 days, and then there's losses of money as you transfer out, not with the fees, but also with the changes in the valuations of what you're settling in. If you reduce from 3 to 5 days down to 3 to 5 seconds, it stabilizes the exchange rates between all of these countries. And as this tech gets more adopted, all of these stable coins or digital assets or whatever, they're just gumballs in this gumball machine of XRP, okay? And what consists of this gumball? So the gumball could be a stable coin or a CBDC or a digital asset. But when it comes to like a stable coin, RLUSD is setting the standard for what it means to be a stable coin, that you are fully backed, you are fully reserved. Everything in circulation should be there. and it settles in 3 to 5 seconds for whatever other thing is in that gumball machine. In 3 to 5 seconds. Like, this gets rid of the idea of a centralized reserve, and why the BRICS nations, because of the technological change, are able to get out of the Federal Reserve System. I almost think, Steve, do you want the Fed to be continuing, and for the United States to have the reserve currency? Because I think this is the big debate that's going on at the highest levels in conservative or Republican or whatever, MAGA. It is not in the interest of the United States to maintain, to civilization itself, to have a reserve currency. We have seen time and again, all throughout these last 5,000 years of human civilization, every time an empire gets that power, it get big, get corrupt. It's all about the most monopolistic power throughout history has always been the power over money. Its creation, not its accumulation. It was the creation, the manipulation of it. So we need to get rid of this, and now we have the technology to do it.
So they were going to bind together first. They kind of figure, almost like, think about, hey, how do we redo the cartels like the OPEC back in the 90s? They're thinking that then it became maybe our combined purchasing power. Maybe we do another currency. We bundle together. Maybe it's China. The CCP was always trying to destroy the U.S. And Trump just comes out the other day and says, hey, BRICS nations, I love the fact you're having conferences and talking about some sort of go-back security. Anybody even thinks about putting 100% tariff on everything, right, to try to blow them up.
Here's the deal. They're not technically abandoning it if they're settling in their own through a decentralized blockchain. Why do you think Brad's meeting with fucking Trump? They're all preparing for this. The Doge boys are going to be going, knocking on Fort Knox. We have all this gold flying back because they're going to be like, oh shit, we hypothecated this out, and all these other places were counting it on their balance sheets as an asset. So if 5 people say they own that person, go, no, they don't. Not all 5 do. One guy does, but not all 5. And that's how the fraud goes. That's why the tokenization is important, because we can tokenize the mineral, the asset, and we now know that this is the only one that should be counted on somebody's balance sheet, which cuts out all the fraud, cuts out, it restores trust into the system. So Steve, you need to look into this, man.
Mom,
has your child ever been caught under a tractor trailer or another pier trying to get?
I don't care.
He's the most progressive guy, and he's doing some stuff, but that's all pro wrestling. And where it really matters, money and power, they have the greatest concentration of wealth to the top 1%, because what they did is they took the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, which is about $880 billion in Bush was there, and they basically flooded the zone with liquidity to prop up real assets, real estate assets, and stocks and bonds. And so if you owned financial or real assets, that run you had, which you had nothing to do with, they took the interest rates to zero. And by the way, if zero interest rates kills the little guy, because you got your little passbook savings account or checking account, you get no interest. So for those 5 or 6 years when interest rates are near zero, big guys can borrow the money, but you're sitting there and you have no capital accumulation, because your little savings account, checking account has no interest on it. So everything was to benefit the wealthy and the power guys. And quite frankly,
not only that, if the rate of inflation, which they lie about, they always say it's less than it actually is, because if we did the calculation how they did in the Carter administration, it were 3 times whatever they say it is. But if the rate of inflation outpaces whatever you're earning on interest, you're taking a loss.
Geithner and the people at the Fed knew this, and they had some guy named Christopher Leonard wrote a book called The Lords of Easy Money. He went back and read all of the conferences and meetings of the Federal Reserve governors, which, by the way, is kept secret for 10 years. He went back to the 10-year, and he's got the transcripts where the guy, I think it was Dick Fisher in the Fed chair in Dallas, is sitting there with.
Also, they've never been audited. ever, not once, and they are the ones that are in charge of the payment system. Like what Scott Bessett was saying. Like, so the Doge boys, they can't even, upgrade it without, asking the Fed for permission. And they're private. They're private and they post no audits for whatever they're flooding out into the economy, which is a tax on us. So they are a taxing authority. Only Congress can pass taxes. They can't just dole that out to a third party. They can't do that. They would have had to pass a constitutional amendment to do that, and they didn't.
When they're doing this, he goes, hey, you understand we're going to eviscerate the working class in this country? We're going to destroy the middle class. We're propping up this entire bailout on these guys' shoulders, and they get nothing. In fact, not only are they going to pay for it, they're going to get crushed because of these zero interest rates of which they can't get access to capital. That's exactly what happened. That's the time I realized every time you've had a financial crisis in the world, you've had a populist reaction. And that's when I said, now I didn't meet Trump till years later, or really get to know him, politically until like 2013 or 14. But I knew as sure as the turning of the earth, you were going to have a populist reaction to that. You had it first in the Tea Party, and then later you had it in the Trump MAGA movement. But this is played out pretty much to the way that it normally plays out. And we're still in a horrible situation. We haven't gotten to 2008. More importantly, nobody associated with that collapse that made all that money and all those fees beforehand, nobody's been held accountable. Nobody.
Do you think that you fast forward to the situation that we see now, where we're talking largely about the financial industry that's very cozy with government? You have Hank Paulson going in, talking
cozy, it owns a government. It owns a government.
Owns a
Lock, stock, and barrel.
It seems to me, and perhaps to you, that there is another industry right now moving in that wants to own the government. And that is the tech industry. That seems very cozy, very close with the government. You've been outspoken, and you're one of the only people who's been publicly outspoken about the dangers of that.
Well, at the same time, right after
Important note here, Mark Anderson had that interview where he was talking about AI, and the government literally told him that, well, we're going to concentrate in like 5 companies, and we've classified whole areas of physics. This is the power of the corporatism, the power of the government being involved in any of this shit, any of it. And it needs to stop. It has to stop. And the only reason why it's even happening is because they have to keep the Fed alive, to keep the scam going. So it always comes back to the Fed. Every single bad thing that's going on, it's all powered by the printing press. So Steve, I don't know why you haven't read The Case for Gold by Ron Paul and The Fed by Ron Paul. Like, you know who he is. I don't understand why every time I watch your stuff, nothing is ever linked back to the Godfather of all, who throughout from the 78 or whatever when he ran for Congress all the way up through when he left Congress, he was the only one to call out all of this shit consistently over that entire time. And he was the one that broke the narratives in 2008. Everybody should go back and watch those 2008 debates with him and just focus on Ron Paul and what he was saying. And in 2012, he paved the way for Trump to come next. And everything he was talking about back then is literally Trump's policies now. Like, maybe not on trade so much and using the bully pulpit, because that wasn't Ron's way, and it is an effective tool. But the point being here is that he wanted to cut it way more back then than what we're even trying to do now.
Around 2008, this is when Obama became aware of the power of social media. There's this famous meeting at San Francisco airport where the guys at Facebook come to him with his team, and they tell him about the power of Facebook, because he's running as a populist outsider against the Clinton machine. Nobody gives Obama a chance. He's an anti-war populist outsider. Nobody gives him a chance at first against the Clinton apparatus, right? The Clinton mafia. He does this, a lot of it's through social media. They have an implicit bargain later with the oligarchs and what I call the algorithmic age. They allow the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Googles, all the big platforms, that charge. They essentially reach a Faustian pact, which is we're a hegemon globally, right? And what we need to do in the age of the algorithm is keep the commanding heights of technology. So we make an implicit deal with the oligarchs. You're going to have no Justice Department interference, no Federal Trade Commission interference. We're not going to try to break you up. They're going to have no antitrust pressure at all. We're going to allow you to become the richest people on earth, okay? But you have to give us the commanding heights in the age of algorithm. And here's what have we found out? That we're 10 or 12 years into this, and we know in the age of algorithm, social media and AI, they've blown them both. On social media, if you look at our social media, it's fairly cumbersome. It's not exactly revolutionary.
TikTok is much bigger.
TikTok is not just bigger, it's so
Better.
much more sophisticated, 1,000 times.
Yeah.
The Chinese Communist Party, it's so lethal because of its addictive nature. TikTok is not on mainland China. They have a version, right, of TikTok that's not so addictive, and they don't let the content they let in the West. This is how powerful it is. We've blown it as far as social media goes. They're orders of magnitude more sophisticated than we are, and ours is quite addictive, but theirs is much more. But then on artificial intelligence is even worse. And now, what do you think? DeepSeek is a psyop or a Sputnik moment?
Right.
Right. It's both bad, but I think you have to defer the fact it may be a Sputnik moment. They are basically saying that our theory of the case in artificial intelligence, which is kind of mass machine learning, right? Power through, and you need all this new energy for the data centers. They're saying that theirs is a totally different profile. So what happens? We've lost the commanding heights in the two very technologies in the
He didn't really explain it there, but DeepSeek basically took everything OpenAI did, condensed it, made it more efficient, and now they got the lead.
Algorithmic age, we made the Faustian bargain on with these guys. There's 75 electric vehicle companies. Google has Bing and DuckDuckGo. There's no competition for Google. There's no competition of Facebook. There's no competition Amazon. Amazon destroyed half the small businesses in this country, flooding the zone with Chinese Communist Party product. There's no competition to X or to Twitter because we let them go. And there's no Justice Department. That's why I'm a neo-Brandeisian when it comes to the Justice Department.
Hold on there. In defense of Elon, he bought the damn thing, got rid of the censorship. I can't post this video on TikTok because of what he's talking about with TikTok. And they do censor. I have to write so many damn appeals. It's ridiculous for my shit. So, I get what he's saying there. And TikTok is very fucking lethal. But you have to also understand that Smith-Mundt Modernization Act legalized government propaganda. And what we know from USA, they're paying all these journalists, warping our fucking reality, and it was authorized by the Smith-Mundt, which Obama signed in. So, it was all... we lost the edge because of government intervention. And propping up these companies and giving them all these government contracts when really they should have been focusing on efficiency, not DEI.
Department. I'm a Lena Khan fan.
You're a Lena Khan fan.
100%.
Break them up.
If she had been allowed, and look, here's Kamala. When Steve Bannon talks about Lena Khan 10 times more than Biden, and particularly Kamala Harris, that tells you it's a fixes in the Democratic Party. It's controlled by all these corporatists. This is the thing of Trump. You've got Gail Slater. You've got Andrew Ferguson. You then have Mike Davis and others in War Room that are neo-Brandeisians and kind of think, hey, Linda Khan, we'd love to have her back.
Explain that term to people.
From Brandeis, Justice Brandeis, Louis Brandeis, had this theory back in the 30s that you have to watch out for private concentrations of power that would then partner with government. If you wanted to get to a totalitarian government, right, you would have major concentrations of private power built around monopolistic.
The term that they often call the corporate state.
Corporate state.
Yeah.
Exactly. And says that is a danger to liberty and freedom, right? Now, he was an FDR guy, etc. You've had it, then a school came up in kind of the 80s from Chicago called the Chicago School that really looked at it from consumer pricing, right? That everything's got to be to the benefit of the consumer. And so it's kind of a general way to go on antitrust.
It's buying people off. It's going, your jobs don't exist anymore, but the T-shirts are less money.
Exactly.
Yeah,
or even in competition, when they look at mergers, what's the price, and they do all these kind of Cato It's a very libertarian school.
But here's the thing, and what you need to understand about what AI means for price is that it's going to be it'll be an equalizer. So no longer will, especially with Amazon and things like that, and they have their web crawlers where someone could be selling something in Maine for $10 and the market in Nevada says it's worth 40. Now you can use that delta to start making money, and then prices will then equalize, right? Because goods will go towards where there is less goods, because price is the indicator where they should go. It's the mover. It's where you deploy your goods and your advertising dollars and everything else. And AI is going to be a great cost-cutting factor in that for everybody. Everybody's going to benefit from that with price equilibrium.
It hasn't worked.
And it's just basically we can immiserate your lives, but if we give you enough creature comforts, if we give you Netflix, if you can DoorDash Taco Bell, which I've done, and I'll admit that, but if you can do all of those things, stop complaining that you can't send your kids to college.
Exactly.
That's kind of the layman's way to say it.
And so in neo-Brandeisian is, to get back to what Louis Brandeis said, is that these great concentrations, which was really...
That's the last time. If I'm ever asked to leave a plane, if I'm ever dragged off a plane for heaping abuse on a flight attendant who deserves it, I'm going to scream, I'm a neo-Brandeisian, as I am dragged off the plane.
You'll get that. What Brandeis saw, though, is the Chinese Communist Party's model. Remember, we did all this after Tiananmen Square when Bush 41 sent Scowcroft over to say, no, we're going to get you. You got to calm down this political stuff, but we see you as a partner on the manufacturing side on a global basis. We will get you in the World Trade Organization. We will give you most favored nation status. We'll do all this. And the theory, they said, oh, we will take the Chinese Communist Party and turn them into a liberal democracy. These will all become Jeffersonian Democrats. The exact opposite happened. We recreated their model of state capitalism and authoritarian power. And that's what you have today with the oligarchs in Silicon Valley. Now, here's the beauty of it. Here's how great the oligarchs are. That we've made them the richest people on earth. We've made them some of the most powerful people on earth. And then exactly when they're exposed for being phonies and what you made the Faustian bargain for on both social media and particularly artificial intelligence, what do?
They flip.
Well, hold it. They do. Well, let me get to the flip in a second. Yeah. They turn around and say, we need a bailout. They say, all you hear right now is that in this city, you're hearing, we need a Marshall Plan, we need a Mercury astronauts plan, we need to turn over all the national labs, the weapons labs, Lawrence Livermore, Sandia, where they made the nuclear weapon, the hydrogen bomb. We need to turn all the national labs to the guys in Silicon Valley, because now we've had a Sputnik moment and the Chinese Communist Party have taken the commanding heights. I go, hang over a second. This is and they're talking $500 billion to $1 trillion bailout for the exact same guys that did this. In addition, understanding the math, right? And Elon understood.
If they do that, there goes the Federal Reserve. Like, there's so many vectors now upon which the Federal Reserve note can hyperinflate. So many vectors. Not only the dropping the interest rates, the BRICS abandoning the dollar, the fucking bailouts coming in, and deploying XRP to get rid of the Nostro-Vostro accounts, which would dump the other half of the world's liquidity onto the open markets. Which maybe that could be the thing is that they're going to use, right? If they want a quick bailout, just unlock that fucking that Nostro-Vostro accounts by using XRP to transact value. Because then you no longer need the Nostro-Vostro accounts if you could settle in your own currency. The Nostro-Vostro is basically in the host nation, the bank has to maintain a certain amount of reserves in that country's currency. So that money is just standing there. It's not working. It's not creating velocity. It's not sped up making investments and growing the economy. So if you want to have a lot of quick cash, deploy XRP. Unlock that Nostro-Vostro.
At first, given his engineer's brain, and really backed our play, but the rest of them hung out until 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 5th of November when Pennsylvania fell. When Pennsylvania fell, Zucker, Bezos, all of them became populist nationalists. They go, we're in. And they got down with their checks to Mar-a-Lago, genuflected, right, and became supplicants.
They didn't want to go to jail. That's what it really is, okay? It's not just about, now we want to try and get deals. Well, the deal is not having Boss Hog, have you have a cock meat sandwich on a Saturday night.
To Trump, and this is why I say these guys are dangerous. They're all progressive Democrats. They were made what they are by the Obama administration. CIA. They're all progressive Democrats. They are totally phony. All they want to do is go to where the source of money is, so they can keep their being oligarchs. Because right now, if you look at them,
and remember, Facebook, people want to give Mark Zuckerberg the kudos for it. It's LifeLog. The NSA created it. They just put this dude as the face.
and look at who the theoreticians they look for, but they're not really on the spectrum of like MSNBC's here and war rooms here, and some guys are more open borders and globalists, others are hardcore populist nationalists. They're in a whole other spectrum, and that spectrum is what I call techno-feudalism. They've been taken out of the world of capitalism. It's no longer markets and profits, since we haven't allowed any competition and allowed these to become these massive companies. They are really digital platforms in rent. They're rent seekers, okay? And their idea is very feudalistic. It's like Venice in the 15th century. It is that the railhead is like the liege lord with the digital platform, and everybody else is a peasant, or what I call a digital serf. And this is how you're going to run it. And they have this network. They call it the network state. There's books out about it now. It's talk about it. And this is what these guys believe. And it's quite dangerous. And this is why I think you're seeing the impersonal nature of what's happening at Doge, which I support going after the administrative state.
Well, that's always been a theme of yours. You want the deconstruction of the administrative state, of the bureaucracy.
Yes.
What is Elon doing, and what is the Doge team doing that you wouldn't do or would do differently?
Let's talk about three things on Elon. Number one, and where I'm his biggest supporter, have given him more credit than anybody. Number one, he was the first of the oligarchs, because I think of his engineering brain, to really look at where we were politically. And he worked through the math to say, hey, look, this Trump thing is actually this populist nationalist movement, which is what I call MAGA plus low information voters, plus part of the Make America Healthy Again. These housewives who were red-pilled during the pandemic, particularly about what their children were being taught in school.
That's right.
And the health thing with the mask. Kind of the Nicole Shanahan crowd, right?
That's right. The Malibu moms.
Now, around Trump, there's always, you have to understand, there's always a countervailing tension with Trump, with people who want Trump to be more Trump, right? Versus those say, you got to calm down, you be nice, and look for the mythic traditional suburban mom that if you say nicer things, she'll vote for you. I keep saying that's never going to happen. Elon came in at a time in the campaign in the spring and summer of 2024 when that was actually being talked about. He sat down with Charlie Kirk's guys and worked through the math of a ground game we supported to do this MAGA plus. The brother wrote $250 million.
I was a part of that in October. Yeah, that's how they got the money to send people like me, who are like campaign operatives, to go out and actually door knock and try and get low propensity voters to go and help elect these Republicans and try and shift this whole thing around. So it was a brilliant way of doing it.
$1 in checks, $250 million, $50 million a month over 5 months. And I tell people, if you don't know about American politics today, when you see huge donors like the Adelsons or the Mercers, and people are talking about putting in $100 million, $150 million, that's over a cycle, a presidential cycle. This brother wrote $250 in the last 5 months, $50 a month to back a ground game, not to put it up on fancy commercials, which most of the billionaires get picked off with. Number one, he backed our play. Would President Trump have won without that? Yes.
Right.
But we wouldn't have known that answer at 10 or 11 o'clock on the Tuesday the 5th. That would have probably taken a couple of days to work through. And I'm not so sure we'd have had 53 guys in the U.S. Senate.
We wouldn't have had the overwhelming mandate to defeat the warped reality that was coming out of the CIA via USA, via those journalists and all these other fucking people.
Probably 51. It'd have been much tighter. Okay, and it was tight enough already. So he definitely had a huge aspect. Number two, he immediately got, like nobody else has got, the deconstruction of the administrative state. He understands that we have a fourth branch of government that's not in the Constitution, that's kind of a permanent government. And they don't care if Trump's passing through or AOC or Bernie Sanders are passing through. They run the deal like they're going to run. And here's what it is. When you take over the government, when you win, you get 4,000 people. You get 3,000 that can hit the day place running immediately. Okay? All you need there is basically a security clearance, right? A pass on drugs, right? And a security clearance. And you can go and you can staff at these mid-level and junior levels immediately. You get 1,000 that have to be Senate confirmed. Those are your senior people. But you have 4,000. In the government, you have about 2.5 or 3 million civilians. You have about 2.5 million to 3 million military. So let's say 5 to 6 million there. Plus you have contractors. Another at executive level, another 5 million. So it makes sense. You have about 10 million people that run this apparatus that cost $6.5 to $7 trillion a year to run, right? Or it transfers money, but it costs a huge amount of money to run. Plus it oversees, I don't know, 60 or 70 trillion dollars of assets, right? All the land, all the oil, everything that we control. That apparatus is so out of control that in order to get down to a sustainable model where we're going to actually get close to a balanced budget, it's got to be deconstructed. You have to take that apart, right? It's got to be made smaller. And you got to make some tough decisions.
Right.
Because programmatically, they do a lot of things. And quite frankly, with the economic distress we have and the corporations bailing on paying decent wages because they've invited the world in here to compete with American labor in American labor's home, that you have more working class people on Medicaid. You have more people on economic, security like food stamps. So it's a tough call. But he saw immediately this is how you have to do it. And if you're ever to get to the deep state, which is the aspects of the Pentagon,
intelligence community,
intelligence, you got CIA, and CIA people should know. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I came to this through hard evidence of seeing it in the first term and dealing with the. You have this. You basically have the CIA. You have aspects of the DNI crowd, which is 17 separate intelligence.
Directorate of National Intelligence.
Intelligence, which has everything. Everybody's got NSA's got the guy. They can look into your phones. They know everything that's going on. Everything. Then you've got the Justice Department with aspects of that, and you got DHS with.
And remember what Tulsi just did while they found out that these NSA employees were using a secure chat log to talk about, their BDSM fetishes and their transgender shit and whatever the fuck else, and on government time, our taxpayer dime paying for this, and they were all Marxists. But here's another thing that no one's even talking about. They were running the NSA, helping curtail the algorithms, and they believe in all this trans stuff and the Marxist stuff. Were they pushing it?
With ATF and others, you got the FBI, you have elements of the Defense Department like DIA. That is the deep state. And what I say is it's like the Praetorian Guard in the Roman Empire. They are actually so powerful now that they can decide, like the Praetorian Guard is, who's the emperor and who's not. This is why they turfed out Trump, and they basically plugged in Biden.
Would you agree with this? Somebody who's smart described this as a parallel command structure that is existing outside of the executive branch, where the president is not read into certain intelligence. He's lied to about troop levels in Syria and things like that. They're conducting business with countries outside of the purview of the White House. And somebody called this a parallel command structure.
Only difference I would make, you're 100% correct, so it's not parallel. It is the command structure. When you sit there, you sit there,
and you need to seize it by getting rid of the corrupt elements of it, or else they'll just hang around. They'll just keep hanging around.
And get a briefing from these people. They will look you in the eye and lie to you. I was put in charge in the first days of working with people like Eric Prince and others to come to a plan the president wanted out of Afghanistan. We'd already been there, I think, going on 18 or 19 years. In the Pentagon, in the apparatus. And I keep saying, I never called it the deep state. It says not a deep state. It's up in your face, right? And they will sit there and make up their own numbers and lie to you. I talked to them at one time. I said, listen, I gave them some points in time about briefings I wanted. I said, I want to see the briefing of this about Afghanistan over the 20 years. This time. And because I knew what they were going to show. They were going to show every time telling whether the president was Bush or Obama. that, hey, we're here. If we just have more money, in 3 years it's going to be perfect. It's like seeing these small companies.
Who's driving this agenda? Is it Raytheon, General Dynamics?
It's a combination of people.
It's the Council on Foreign Relations.
It's definitely the outside companies, but it's also the guys like Brennan. It's people who have been here forever, been in the intelligence.
Brennan
community.
is the guy that keeps coming up.
Bad dude.
As a very dangerous individual. Guy. He's a dangerous person.
Dangerous, but there's
Clapper's a dangerous
there's
guy.
100. Clapper, Hayden, those are the guys you see at the very top.
Yeah.
Right? But they also have coaching trees like Belichick, etc.
Of course.
So it's deep into the apparatus. And this is the thing they have, called the interagency.
Did they have anyone in the Trump White House, the first one?
Yeah, but so I asked Mike Flynn, I said, look, let me see the charts this is the first day. I want to see the charts for the National Security Council. When I came off sea duty in the 70s and came back, I came back to the Pentagon to be a special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations, basically a junior officer, Grandoon. This is in 1981, when Reagan's like, the guys in the Pentagon at that time thought the National Security Council ran the world. The National Security Council had 25 people. So you had Kissinger, you had Brzezinski, and then they picked Richard V. Allen because they didn't want some Dr. Strangelove type.
Right.
Reagan didn't. That had 25 or 30 people, and the guys in the Pentagon said, these fuckers run the world, right? They're too powerful. Flynn comes back on the first day he goes down with Jared and the president. He's got these charts like this. It's like this thing. I said, Mike, I didn't want to see the entire national security apparatus. I don't want to see the Pentagon. He goes, no. This is the National Security Council. I go, what? 292 billets. If you look at it, they're into everything. And I go, my God. I said, how many political appointees we got? He says about 40 or 50. I said, well, hey.
From 25 in 1981, almost up to like 260 of people that are in these different industries that the CIA can then put their agenda in, for whatever reason, to facilitate the plan, whatever the new scam is, to keep the real scam going of the Federal Reserve System.
Heck, no offense, we don't know 40 or 50 MAGA guys that step in there right now. We have to get rid of some of these. These are called detailees. They come from the Pentagon. They come from the CIA. They come from DNI. They come from DHS. It's essentially the way the deep state runs the system. They have, think about it, with 292 billets, they have...
Billets meaning...
But slots where a person goes.
Where somebody goes,
yeah. It's 292 bodies, but they have a billet, boom, where they plug a person in. We wanted to get rid of those.
So they know that new administrations coming in are not always going to have these 200, 300 people.
No, Obama, no. In fact, it's impossible. First of all, you don't even have the allocation of political appointees.
But you might have 25.
25.
So that's the thing. So by making it larger...
Yes. And they have a phrase, I call it their fetish. They have a thing called the interagency process. In other words, everything has to go through the CIA's got to sign off, the State Department. You got to remember, the CIA has a military aspect to it. The State Department has an intelligence aspect to it. The deep state is like kudzu, and it's run by the CIA. The CIA controls behind the scenes.
And the CIA is run by the billionaires.
Well, the CIA reports to, first off, an elite class of Americans have just been, from OSS to the CIA, very Ivy League. When I talk about the credential class, the traditional control of the CIA has been kind of the Ivy League. Yeah, Harvard, Yale, Harvard Law School, yes, Princeton.
Skull
a little bit of
bones.
that's changed, but not the mentality. The very mentality is that
Cold War liberalism.
They are the guardians of this republic.
That's right.
Right? And you have these politicians, whether they're clowns like Bill Clinton.
No. They know they are the guardians of the Federal Reserve System. That's the key thing that Steve just doesn't touch on for some reason. I don't know why. Because it's very clearly, the only reason why we have this intelligence agency is to keep our hegemon as the world reserve currency, which is actively being abandoned all across the world. Doesn't matter what Trump says at this point about slapping 100% tariff on them. If they could settle in their own currencies, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They have the manufacturing. They have trade lanes. They have their own techs. They have all of these things that were hollowed out from our nation. And now they no longer need to use the dollar or SWIFT to settle their transactions. And they're not going to. They already said it. So the CIA is there to protect the Fed. It always ends up back at the Fed. every single time. And this, Steve, if you would listen to Ron Paul, read his books, understand Austrian economics, not Chicago School. Chicago School called it wrong a lot over the last 50 years. Austrians, though, have been calling it right the entire time.
Or neophytes like Obama, or dangerous individuals like Trump. They can wander in and out, but they are the guardians of the republic. Very like Plato's guardians. They are the guardians of this republic. That America's become a hegemon because of them.
They decide we're going to stay in the Ukraine for 3 years.
First off, they decide why with some, and this is one of the things I told McMaster's. He would sit there and go, "We got the greatest team, and we're going to do all this." I said, "Dude," I said, "You've had Bush, you've had Obama, and now you got us. You've had a center right group of neoliberal conservatives in Bush. You've had the biggest group of progressives ever under Obama." And I said, "We're here for 20 years." I said, "You've had smart guys around this table. Why has it never changed?" And the reason it never changes, that the neoliberal neocons have an apparatus. That apparatus is the deep state. And this is why I say if AOC or Bernie was there, they'd be just as dismissed. This is what eventually impeached Trump. They saw Trump as such a danger. This was the whole Russia hoax. This was a guy named Colonel Derek Harvey and an Army sergeant called Higgins were two brilliant guys that understood this. They actually went through and came back and made a presentation. Here are the deep staters that actually in the National Security Council, right? Here's who their names are in ranked order. The ones that should be turfed out. The number one name was this Eric Camarillo guy, who eventually was the whistleblower on the Trump call to Ukraine. The original whistleblower, was a guy that 2 years before they identified as one of the most dangerous guys because he's a deep stater.
I love factory meals. They're high protein and you can do anything.
Yeah, and Eric Caramello, he was what? You could never even mention his damn
out
name.
Out of the goddamn life.
You could never even mention his name on social media at all because he was that important to the structure, to everything.
This is why you see President Trump going after it hammer and tong right now. Also, Elon's hitting it from a different angle. He's kind of going after the administrative state. He'll get to the deep state because one of their slush funds, like USAID. USAID has essentially always been a CIA front. That you see, yes. Do they have water projects in India? Do they have some stuff in sub-Saharan Africa? They do. That's all on the surface to make you feel better. They're running this thing, particularly the funding.
What it does, it gets their people in country. That's the point there for them running these NGOs and everything else. It gets their people in the country for a legit reason, right? And so many world leaders have come out now condemning U.S. aid because they know at this point it is totally a CIA thing in order to foment these color revolutions to collapse their government if they're not, doing the bidding of whatever we say to do. This is the shit BRICS is done with and the rest of the world. That's why the ground is shifting below our feet. And we need to have a tech that can handle all the transactions once the Federal Reserve note hyperinflates, because you have to have a replacement when the system finally fucking collapses, which we're nearly there now. So, Steve, look into Ripple.
All the funding all the media against Orban in Hungary, funding money to all these Soros-backed institutions, NGOs and NGOs on the southern border to do the invasion. A lot of that was funded by USAID.
And I mean, this is somewhat unrelated, but I guess perhaps incredibly related. Why did the media take very little interest in the person who almost killed the president?
It's 100%
because, dude. Did you not read that USAID was literally funding all these fucking journalists to warp the news cycle and everything, and then you add on top of it the oligarchs like Zuckerberg, Bezos, and everybody else doing search engine optimization to then suppress any sort of dissent or any sort of anything going out there that they don't want to contradict the narrative. So yeah, the guy that tried to shoot Trump at the first one, and the second one was worse in my opinion because he was from Ukraine. He went out there, was fighting in Ukraine, came back home. That's why we need to ban all of them motherfuckers from ever coming back home. That is inviting a mercenary force here in the United States with an axe to grind against our government, our people.
They didn't know much of the assassination attempt, but think about it. The media, I was just watching because of the classic on TCM the other night in the Oscar month, they had All the President's Men.
Right.
If you go back and look,
it's a great movie.
A great, fabulous movie. It's classic. But if you go back and look at the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, they were killing them every other day.
And the people, New York Times, the Washington Post, these people were anti-institutionalists. They were all over the FBI. They were all over the CIA.
Until Operation Mockingbird, which by the CIA to go into these news organizations to then take them over, and then of course they partner up with their corporate interests to buy them out, completing the circle of power there.
All over investigative reporting. That's
Another thing. Tucker Carlson brought this up about he mentioned All the President's Men. That's Woodward and Bernstein breaking Watergate. Tucker Carlson talked about this. He's like, look, the Watergate break-in was done by a bunch of CIA people, okay? And Bob Woodward, he's not some, this is quoting Tucker now, he's not some just intrepid reporter, trying to bust in corruption. He was a former Department of Naval Intelligence officer. CIA. So the whole thing was a CIA coup from start to finish to take out Nixon. Because Nixon was having talks with Dick Helms prying into the assassination of JFK. And Dick Helms was the director of the CIA at the time. And remember, what was happening right subsequent to that, after Dick Helms was gone and Nixon was removed, Bill Colby became the next CIA director. And he was the one that was breaking the so-called family jewels, which was revealed in the Frank Church Committee hearings. And for the first time had a little bit of oversight over the intelligence community and regulating them. But what happened to Frank Church? Airplane crash? Bullshit.
Flip. The Democratic Party and the mainstream media became the defenders of the institutions. This is why every night you hear them banging on us. Oh, they're trying to get out of NATO. They're trying to do this. They're trying to tear down. They got Kash Patel and Dan Bongino at the FBI. They have Tulsi Gabbard. The Democratic Party, and I think they know politically they're in a tough jam. They became the defenders of a corrupt system. They became the defenders of institutions that clearly have to be at minimum.
And the only way they could maintain this is literally because they are blackmailed to do so. There's no other. These are all common sense solutions. Common sense solutions to any sort of national problem that we got going on. Nobody wants World War III, so of course we have to make fucking peace, and Zelensky should shut the fuck up and do the deal. But the point is that we now have the Diddy tapes, the Epstein files, and everything else. And my thought is that, well, if they have all of this evidence, now Cash is in there, so is Pam Bondi and everything else, and they delayed the release, exposing all the Con Inc. fucking influencers that were going to put it behind a fucking paywall. Information that we've all been wanting for a long time. My thought is, Pam trolled them people, shown a spotlight on the fact that the Southern District in New York is defying the law and defying her authority and Cash's authority. Also shining another bigger spotlight on the FBI corruption, which Cash is going to begin clearing out. So this is all raising the profile of this, right? That could be the cover. And they actually do have the files, and they are using it now to achieve the ends that are in the interest of the world as well as the United States. Peace, prosperity, get the laws passed, because all you fucking Congress members, you've been taking all this money when you're sitting on these NGOs and you're money laundering it, and this now we're weaponizing it against you. It has all the airs of a Trump play,
Reformed, and I think, quite frankly, purged and taken down and rebuilt. So they're defenders of that. All the mainstream media is the biggest defenders. I mean, on the Washington Post, David Ignatius comes on Morning Joe. We call it the Langley Bugle, the right. Washington Post. It's you're getting the pure thing you're getting the CIA's point of view that day when you see Ignatius. You see the same things in the New York Times. big reporters on defense. You're getting the Pentagon's perspective. So the mainstream and liberal media have
and this
become
is just perpetual war for perpetual peace.
invade everywhere and invite everyone in.
Invite everyone in
and invade everywhere.
It's a Steve Saylor quote: "Invade the world, invite the world."
Invite the world.
And then you have a citizenry here that's immiserated, that is paying for all these wars. Their lives are terrible and getting worse.
Getting worse.
And
their kids' futures are shot. And they're manning. Remember, it's these kids. It's the family. It's the children of this eviscerated middle class and working class. The kids are walking patrol in the Hindu Kush, or with the 101st Airborne Brigade in Romania on the Ukraine border, or in the 2 carrier battle groups in the Red Sea.
They're calling this democracy. They're called.
Yeah, it's us. It's our people that got to go fucking fight. These trust fund bastards. They'll go skiing on the Alps. They don't give a fuck as long as their quarterly bonuses are met. And that country, whoever we're fucking invading or trying to defend, or whatever the scam is, they keep taking the U.S. dollar. The Federal Reserve note.
Calling you a fascist. Right. They're saying Steve Bannon's a fascist. Yeah. What he's describing right now is democracy. Have you noticed the way this is being presented? I'm sure you have.
Yes, 100%. And this is what I love. This is what I love about it.
Right.
We're winning elections
with
bigger coalitions.
In the woods with the goat head is democracy. The council is democracy. You know what I mean? Like,
well, they're total.
Bohemian Grove.
It's authoritarian. It's authoritarian model like the Chinese Communist Party. They want a couple of industries, state capitalism, where they have elite merger, right, between big government and big business. They control things. And what I find so laughable is we're actually winning elections. Let's take 24. After having the 2020 election stolen from us and being now debanked, deplatformed. Remember, I'm deplatformed everywhere. War Room's not on.
How did they do that? When you talk about that, because I will have to ask you, because people will jump on that and they will say that nobody found any proof, then there are no Republicans and no courts.
Here's the proof. Here's one of the pieces of proof you got. In 2022, the people, remember, we got 63.5 million votes in 16. I thought we did a pretty damn good job. We got 74 million votes in 2020, including we picked up 12 House seats. So you're telling me in a Nancy Pelosi, I think we won 14 and they won 2, so net 12. We picked up 12 House seats in that election.
What do you think the mechanism is?
It's mail-in ballots. I'm not a machine guy. I think it's mail-in ballots. It was very evident what they did in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, and in Michigan. It was mail-in ballots. And remember, he only won by the same margin that we did, the 72,000. You know, when you accumulate Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that's what Biden won by. You take the other states, these are small numbers, right? It's 10,000 in Georgia, 9,000 in Arizona. It was mail-in ballots. But here's the point. Where are those guys? Where they've gone since then? They didn't vote in the midterm elections.
Right.
They didn't vote in 2024. And so where are
they disoriented, disenchanted, or they don't exist?
They don't exist.
Okay.
They don't exist. They 100% don't exist.
Yeah.
They're disenchanted. They don't hate Trump. Oh, they only vote because they...
And now we know where they're drawing the fucking names from. The Social Security Administration. 300-year-olds, And I think he's wrong about the machines. The machines definitely have a part to play in it. They can be hacked. Steve, come on. This isn't hard.
They hated Trump. They don't hate Trump any less. They see him as a hero. It's ridiculous. We can win. This is why on democracy, we love democracy, because you're not going to beat us. Right now, our coalition is building.
Right.
Trump got 39% of black men in the country to vote for him. Not just that, a lot of black men are just not going to vote for the Democrats. Remember, if they don't vote for the Democrats, it's one to us. If they vote for us, it's a 2-banger, right? Hispanics. Starr County, Texas, a hard-scrabbled county in South Texas, 97% Hispanic and blue collar. The most Hispanic county in the United States. Voted for Hillary Clinton by 60% in 2016. In 2024, Trump won it by 16%. The Hispanic working class is coming our way. The African American working class is coming our way. If in President Trump's...
But this is why you've urged Elon Musk, be careful with Social Security and Medicare.
Oh, yeah, and Medicaid. Medicaid. I keep telling people, don't think, in the old days, Medicaid was an urban thing. And I said, you can't take a meat axe to it. I said, this is not about race anymore. This is about economic distress. If you go and look at Idaho and, the American Redoubt up in Montana and Wyoming and the Christian.
Now, these programs never should have been started. They never should. When we should have an option to opt out of it. But everything that Elon's trying to do is to get the fraud out of it, right? So it is more sustainable at least. Never should have been started, but it should be run right. And that's the whole point of Doge going into these programs and to figure out, okay, what's going on here? Why are we getting charged $20,000 for a fucking $10 item? It just massive corruption like that with the insurance companies that go on. And, Medicaid, like Medicare, like it all comes back from LBJ and the Great Society program. And everyone should look, especially if you're black out there, look into what Johnson said about the Great Society program and your people.
Readout. I think there's something like 80 or 90% of the babies born in Idaho are on Medicaid. Medicaid is now for the working class, the white working class, and the Hispanic and black. These are our voters, right? You have to be very careful. Medicaid, you have to get the illegal aliens off, and you have to put work requirements. But just don't think you can go and put a meat axe to it.
This project to destroy the distinction between citizen and non-citizen is entirely not only to drive down wages, but to kind of destroy any idea of what a contract, a social contract
and national identity. Yes,
yeah,
100%.
National identity.
Yes.
And a contract between
1,000%.
the citizens and the government saying, I give you this, I am owed that.
Yes.
But if we destroy the distinction between citizen and non-citizen, right.
Social contract. Everyone should read John Locke. He was a philosopher that basically influenced Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, everybody else. His first treatise was the basically the revocation of the divine right of kings, and the second was like on property and liberty and the social contract. Between we have one. It's called the Constitution.
Look at the non-citizen.
But also, it goes into what is the ethical way of to govern your people, and you should actually be promoting your own country and your own country's interests, because if you're the parents, you must do this for your children to make them have a better life for themselves, and the life of a nation can go on.
It's shocking, right? The non-citizens have been given everything. Look at the 10 to 12 million illegal alien invaders, and I don't blame them. You and I would do the exact same thing. You were invited here by the federal government.
Right.
People shouldn't, your audience should not lose track of the fact that in these reconciliation things we're talking about, for the mass deportations, it's $175 billion we're asking for, not just to secure the border, but for the mass deportation.
And you're talking really about the people that came in the last 4 years.
I'm only talking. I'm right now not concerned about anybody that came in before January 20th of 2021, because the way I calculated, there's 10 to 12 million, and plus, a million bad hombres, right? Criminals. I was in Danbury.
Yeah.
10% of the prison. It's a prison for 800 people, I think. 800 inmates.
Some
it's got
of members of my family from Ireland came in the early 1900s. I think a few of them, just to get them out, just to make a point. If I could write a few names down and you could pass it to Tulsi Gabbard, just to make a point
100%.
that, hey, we don't.
It's
we
not
don't
about
know
race.
where it ends.
No. I'm saying the guys coming over from Ukraine. You go to Montauk.
No, and you've said the H-1B visas, where tech people are bringing in.
Scam.
So my question to you is, and this is a question
I'm a hardcore, but remember, I'm hardcore. To me, everything revolves around the American citizen. I don't care your ethnicity, your race.
This is why I love Steve. He is absolutely right about 99% of the shit that he says on like all these politics and everything else. When it comes to the finance side, and especially with the tech, that's where his failings are. And what he's about ready to say here about, the philosophy of we should be supporting the American citizen. That's what you should be doing as someone who is running the government, or being a leader of a nation.
Gender
and historically is what has always been done. That's why kings were kings.
Whatever your religion. If you're an American citizen, it should be like the Roman citizenship. You get a special deal. The whole system depends upon you. The whole world's economic system comes down your shoulders. You're paying the taxes to really finance the hegemon. In addition, your sons
and us paying taxes is a signal to the rest of the world that we're signing up every week for the scam. That we're keep signing up for it. The other nations, they pay attention to that. What is the attitudes of the American people? We had this great shift that's happened where we all move, we were already right wing. The entire nation was. The idea that there was a left that was the psyop, that they don't exist, and is propped up by just all these fake narratives and brainwashing and mass delusion hypnosis. So we were always right wing, and it was always from the CIA that kept this going, man.
Daughters are the ones, man. You're in Romania with the 101st. You're on the carrier battle group in the Red Sea. You're on patrol in the South China Sea.
You're defending the order.
You're defending the whole system, and yet you're the one that's screwed over consistently. That's got to flip. Everything's got to be like, for instance, these visa programs. They shouldn't work unless they work for American citizens. And what I mean by that...
You've said there's a lack of black and Hispanic people in
zero.
tech.
I mean,
zero.
Okay, the most progressive, think about it, the most progressive people on earth in the Obama administration created an apartheid state. The Silicon Valley is an apartheid state. There's no blacks or Hispanics. And the South Asians or Indians are there as indentured servants. They're working for a third to 50% less than American citizens, often in kind of horrible conditions with 4 or 5 guys to a condo and working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, because if they complain, they get the boot. Okay, it's not acceptable. Well, and not just that.
Vivek Ramaswamy says it's because Americans are lazy and watched too much TV, or they're not educated, or they're...
They have not shown me, and because they all backed off coming after me on H-1B visas, I said, show me one thing. I want to see one fucking billet, one person, in any of those billets, of the millions are here, one. Show me one in that billet that has a better education or a better skill set than an American. They can't show me one. They can't show me one, and they won't show me one because it doesn't exist. It has nothing to do. And when the media says high skilled, these are not high skilled. This is basically the essentially the mass programmers, right? That this is not.
He's right. But at the end of the day, we need that tactic in order to screw over some other nation. You know, like, at the end of the day, we have to look out for our own interests. And we see another nation that's burgeoning in all these techs or whatever, and we can poach some of them, become an American, you know? We should have that tech, that capability, that tactic. I think Steve glosses over that portion of the argument.
It's all about getting it cheaper for 1/3, because most of the cost of these companies is in the programming, right? Or the technicians, the technical aspect of it. They pay 1/3 of,
and that's disappearing anyway because of AI. So it's always just a stopgap anyway. So all those jobs are gone. Let's just say right now, within the next couple of, they're gone, absolutely gone.
50% less. They have higher margins. They have higher stock prices. They get bigger. Their warrant packages worth much. The math here is not complicated, but they can't show that the H-1B visas are bringing in more educated. We have plenty of educated people in the United States now. People in the United States are going to want to get paid a certain amount because they're not going to compete against the world. Number two, being Americans, you got a little cussedness and grit. This is what, hey, and you're going to be vocal about what working conditions are. That's what it means to be American. That same grit and tenacity and getting up in people's faces is the same reason that we won World War II, the same reason we won the Cold War, the same reason that those same Americans or their sons or daughters are on the carrier battle group in the South, in the
American Moxie.
Red Sea. You can't separate them. And here's the problem: is we've invited the world. It is not acceptable in this nation to bring in foreign workers to compete against American workers for these jobs. This is bullshit. It should be. I want a total moratorium until we get sorted exactly what's going on, and until those billets on H-1Bs, which are so corrupt, I would shut it all down, all of it. I deport immediately everybody. I would give every billet in 60 days, every job in 60 days to an American citizen. And Bob's your uncle, and we have to be this hardcore. I am very hardcore on these things, because if you don't take it to an extreme, you're never going to change it. The capitalists always...
I totally agree with him.
...want to have lower wages and more malleable population.
And it's not even capitalism; it's crony. You know what I mean? It's the corporate state.
Yes, it's the corporate state.
Corporatism.
We don't have capitalism.
Bezos, Andreessen, guys like
the
this.
reason they're all oligarchs.
Do they love him?
It's corporatism, and the only reason why that happens is because they literally hand out corporate welfare and tax breaks and everything to all these fucking corporations. Like this, it's all done through Congress and these fucking agencies that no one has any goddamn control over.
America and what's
no, but listen, their network, they're oligarchs. What they love is their money and their power. Have they ever sacrificed for anything in this country? When President Trump came up for the first time and tried to give working class people, and it showed in the 2019 numbers that blue collar wages increasing at a faster rate than white collar wages, college graduates higher than college graduates. Did they support him? No, they deplatformed him, debanked him. Other thing, they have no. Do you see those guys volunteering to go overseas and defend their country? No, what they want to do is go to the Pentagon and get a big fucking fat Pentagon contract, right, to leech off this nation. No, they're not good guys. And I keep telling people in our party, don't think they support us because they don't. They're very good at knowing where power is. And right now they think that we're, before Obama and the Clintons were the power and Biden, now it's us. They, just like they betrayed them and flipped on them, they flipped on their creation of progressive Democrats. They are progressive Democrats.
I'm going to do the ad for Blue Chew now because it is a unique online.
I don't care.
But
I said on the two big ones, backing our play in 2024, the deconstruction administrative state, and the third, which is, this populist revolt going throughout the world, which he's been very vocal of backing in places like England and in Germany. And I tell people, I said, look.
Elon,
this brother brings the two tactical nuclear weapons of modern politics. Mm-hmm. Unlimited money. To wit, he wrote a $250 million check. Yeah. It doesn't affect his... He's still got baby mamas lined up, right? It doesn't affect his lifestyle. Right? Plus, he's got a platform. He can bind what he wants to bind and loose what he wants to loose. He can drive up the awareness of something or crush it, right? So with those two things, there's not a centrist government in Europe that can withstand this. There's very little money in European politics. The entire campaign for Brexit, which is really taking England's sovereignty back, and the Remain guys are very powerful. It's the establishment. That entire campaign is about 25 million pounds. It's nothing. So he's got unlimited power. And I think directionally he's trying to do some good things. I've got problems with one.
Does it worry you that one person has that much power?
It always worries me. It worries me that the concentration of power in Silicon Valley and the concentration of... Now, President Trump has a special relationship with him. We all trust President Trump. President Trump says on top of this, it's just that you have to... one of my bigger problems with Elon Musk is transhumanism. The number one... Of all the problems we have massive financial problems, we have massive geostrategic problems, and massive immigration and sovereignty issues. All of those problems are solvable. Tough decisions. We've let a lot of good alternatives go away. It gets tougher and tougher every year. They can all be solved, and they can be solved by rational policies, and you can solve those in debate, and some days you're going to win, some days you're going to lose. Underneath that, we have the most important time in the history of the Homo sapiens upon us. We are converging on something called the singularity. And it's just not AI. AI is one part of it. You have artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. You also have regenerative robotics. You have quantum computing. You have advanced chip design. You also have CRISPR and gene splicing.
Manipulation.
And blockchain. So with all of these things, especially with him talking about AI, understand that AI will always be programmed to try and seek the most efficient pathway. What's more efficient than Ripple's tech of 3 to 5 seconds to settle this transaction? So programmatically, mathematically, they will choose that one to settle the transaction for any of these institutions or anything else because it's the most efficient one out there. This is one of those times like the most efficient is going to win on how we're going to be transacting value.
That's all converging on a spot called the singularity. On this side of that, you have the Homo sapien, something that's been around, I don't know, for 100,000, whenever all the other species fell aside, we survived. Okay, so you have the Homo sapien for, I don't know, 100,000 or a million years. On the other side of that, you have Homo sapien 2.0. And the pressure, as if people under 35 or 40 didn't have enough pressure on them, because they have more pressure than any generation in this country, I think, of pressure on them, of economically, of socially. You're now going to add another pressure, which is for their children.
Do you enhance yourself?
Yeah, exactly. Or more, even not yourself. If you're saying, no, I'm going to see this thing through as what I am and I'll make myself better, but you look at your kids and you say, hey, look, I worked my ass off and I went to an Ivy League school. I went to a great university. I became great in a sport. I became great in my profession or my love, my hobby, whatever it was. And you're going to sit there and go,
let's chip the kids.
There's only so many slots at Harvard. There's only slots at the University of Michigan. There's only so many slots at Wisconsin or Arizona.
Chip the kids.
The whole world's chipping them. You're going to have these debates and you're going to sit there at night going, do I chip the kid or not?
Chip the kids.
Honey, chip the kids. And
Here's the problem. Here's the big problem that no one seems, that they kind of gloss over. All the poor people won't be able to afford the chips, but the rich people will. And anybody that gets the money available to chip themselves, do you have the money for the upgrade? Because whoever has the fucking upgrade of that year, whatever is coming out, and the upgrades will be faster and faster and faster and faster, you'll have to put up more money to get the fucking upgrade. It'll be a never-ending thing. You'll never catch up to the rich. It'll just be a breakaway civilization at that point, where they're doing this CRISPR gene editing, they're making superhumans and everything, and we will be fucked.
Saying this is going to cause, as a society and a civilization, we're not ready to have that conversation yet. And it by the way, it's going to drive politics. Look at Elon, and this is why, because the industrialists in Silicon Valley are taking the typical easy way industrialists have in the issue about labor and about manufacturing.
Hold on, Steve. Here's what you're not understanding, though. We do not control the rest of the world. They're sovereign nations. They will. All it will take is one nation chipping all of their citizens and then giving them the upgrade every single year, free of charge. Well, not free because it's taxes. But the point is that will make that population of that nation far and exceed everybody else in the competition. Which means it's a part of their national defense at that point to have a super intelligent citizenry that can do all these things and be as effective as they could be, more so than any first world nation. So will chipping the citizenry be a part of a national defense initiative? I think that's the real question here at the end of the day, because you cannot. We're not going to be able to dictate what China does. What if they chip their entire population and then give them the upgrade every year? What's that going to do to us? We're going to have to do it too. And that's going to violate all sorts of theorems and philosophies about individual rights and right to self-determination and self-preservation. All this laundry list of shit. Okay? But the Chinese Communist Party, they don't give a fuck. It's go ahead,
That is still trying to do the great American innovation and kind of the Tom Peters management in search of excellence, management by wandering around, like having the R&D facility next to the manufacturing facility so the engineers could walk to the floor and see the artisans, these guys, and get production, better production experience, get down the learning curve, make things better. American innovation was always our greatest power. What we did is we outsourced. We just shipped the factories over to China because you know why? For efficiency, we want cheaper labor. It's easier to do that. We keep the R&D here, and guess what? It was never the same again. But we got lower labor costs. You either send it to China or you outsource it to India. That was the lazy way to do it, and it had a massive impact on manufacturing. The same thing's happening in AI, and this is why people have to wake up. AI's got two paths it can go down. An efficiency path, that I'm just going to use AI and blow out everybody under 35 years old that's in their first administrative, managerial, or tech job, or I can use it as an engine of innovation, right? To work. And right now, we're taking just like the guys made the basic mistake of doing the what I call the mass type of AI, which is the model that we're using, right? Which is machine learning in a mass way that requires massive data centers, massive replication, massive
and
energy.
That's like ChatGPT and things like this.
Versus what DeepSeek is,
right?
Right? Which is now.
Do you think DeepSeek is legit? Do you think they were able to accomplish this, or do you think
I'm not. I'm not smart enough to know, but
I don't know either.
Here's what I would say. Even if it's a psyop, we have to, I think, assume, for the purpose of the discussion going forward, it may be a Sputnik or quasi-Sputnik moment in what we're going to do about it, because now we're in a horrible situation. Because now the oligarchs come to...
What he means by Sputnik, during the 50s, that was the first thing that the Russians went into outer space, and it caused the entire United States to be like, oh my God, we're losing the space race, we better dump a bunch of money into it. That's what he means by the Sputnik moment.
And say, well, Bannon, how can you sit there and say we should be broken up? How can you want Lena Khan and you're neo-Brandeisian? How can you want to break it up? Now more than ever, we need to have national champions. Now more than ever, you must make another Faustian bargain. Is
there any point to that where they say we need supremacy in that?
They're saying it now.
Technology sector. Well,
they're saying this is the $500 billion bailout. They turn to us and say we need a Mercury program. We need a Marshall program. We need to turn the national labs over to us.
The taxpayers have to fund it.
The taxpayers they ain't putting it up, and the venture capitalists they're looking for a bailout. Anytime you hear Mercury program, anytime you hear Marshall program, understand that's coming out of your paycheck.
And is this similar in your mind to...
Again, you don't need to do a bailout if you just unlock those Nostro Vostro accounts. All that money comes just dumped onto the market, and you can just take it up for any of these programs.
When people say we need to go into Iraq and into Afghanistan, and we need all this money, and
it's the same thing as the bailout of the banks. It's always looking for the little, and obviously going there. The little guy pays for it. It's your sons and daughters that are in Iraq or Afghanistan
that are doing it,
and you're paying for it, and not just your taxes, your private equity. Remember, Zuckerberg and all these guys came out of graduate schools. They didn't have any money. The people invest that Peter Thiel's were and people like that. It's all pension fund money. So it's Oregon State Pension Fund. It's CalPERS. It's Alabama Teachers Fund. All of their money, this is the Greek tragedy part of this. The American working class and middle class have essentially, through their work and hard work and savings, right, has paid for their own destruction, has paid for, that's the Greek tragedy part of it.
Right.
Your greatest strength was turned against you. Your ability to be a good householder, your ability to actually have something, your ability to pay your taxes on a regular basis and have a little something put away, that's what the venture capitalists and the hedge funds used to ship the jobs overseas and destroy not only your own economics of your personal life, but to make sure that your children and grandchildren essentially live like Russian serfs. That's the revolt that you're seeing. Now, people can't totally articulate it. Number one is...
Or give a solution for it. And here's the entire point. XRP is a yield-generating asset that literally facilitates transactions, speeding up the velocity of money, creating more economic growth. And here's the thing: if you want to do a universal basic income, you couldn't do it if you want to tax the economy to then redistribute it out. But how you could do it is give every single American as a form of basically reparation for all the theft that we've been under and all the gaslighting, manipulation, the CIA, laundry list of fucking evil shit. You give everybody part of that Ripple fucking escrow so that that way they can stake it and earn yields off of it. Or the United States just buys it outright, puts it in the strategic reserve, and then starts earning that yield to pay off whatever debts and finance the nation as we so choose, which also frees the world from the dollar leverage system that the Federal Reserve is doing, which the CIA enforces, which SWIFT enforces, which the IRS enforces, and this is probably why we have the SEC case still hanging out there for Ripple, because it's going to be decided, all right, are you going to pay in Federal Reserve notes or are you going to pay in fucking XRP to contribute to the strategic stockpile? And why there's this huge debate going on between XRP and all these other fucking digital assets especially with Bitcoin, which we know it's a fucking bomb. It was created by the Central Intelligence Agency or the NSA or some dark whatever, because we don't know who Satoshi is, and he holds that huge bag, and now we have the Biden missing bag, and all of a sudden, if we add that in, we're basing our valuation of our assets and our investments upon that, and our credit. That fucking bag gets dropped. The value crashes, and it'll happen on a Friday because it's a 24-hour market, and by Monday the start of trade, everyone's screwed. So it's a nuclear fucking bomb with Bitcoin. But with XRP as a yield generating asset and having all these stable coins as gumballs in the machine that are fully backed, fully reserved, restoring trust into the system again, and giving Americans a way to have a piece of how we transact and take a yield from it, usurping the power of the fucking banks. And that's the entire point here. So Steve, take a look at Ripple.
The system's never explained to you. You never explain how up here on Capitol Hill you can run these massive deficits. Well, how can it be paid for? How can we not bankrupt? Well, we have this money machine called the Federal Reserve that can just create money, that we can create the bond. What we can't sell to foreign countries, we can just create ourselves. And that's how you end up with 125% of GDP in debt, with $1 trillion being added every 100 days. And inflation's not going to go away until you stop this massive federal spending. It's not a supply chain issue anymore. It's too many dollars chasing too few goods. And as we keep having these massive deficits, the inflation is going to be embedded in the system. And as we have to refinance, you're going to refinance it at higher rates. You're not going to get rid of this inflation. And it's a death spiral.
Two final questions.
Okay.
And they know it. They know it. That's why they don't give a shit. Like, that's why they did that CR at the end of December with all that fucking pork there, and why we still have all this spending going on, why there's such resistance against Doge. The permanent political class, the deep state, whoever you want to call it, they know and all these politicians who are going to pass a law here soon where it's going to ban themselves from insider trading, giving them the excuse to cash out because they know that the Titanic hit the iceberg with blockchains and BRICS and the rest of the world's abandoning the dollar as a reserve currency because they can now, because they're technologically able to do so. And in the crisis that's coming, when the Federal Reserve note finally fucking collapses, which it is on its way, and I think Doge with Fort Knox and with the Fed going and knock on the Federal Reserve door, asking, hey, where's the gold at the New York Central Bank? Because there's a few depositories of the gold. There's Fort Knox, there's Denver, there's West Point, there's New York, and I think one other. We need to have an open audits of every single one at the same time, so that way they're not just moving the gold around for wherever the cameras are. We have to make sure that they have all the same fucking serial numbers that they had when they first deposited it, so that way we know it wasn't rehypothecated to fucking basically fraud against the American people committed by the Federal Reserve System. There's so many indicators now, especially with the general economic news of the day, Kobayashi letter, please read that we are on this pathway now, and it's irreversible. It's irreversible at this point. It doesn't matter what Doge does. Yes, they're increasing efficiency and all this other stuff and getting rid of the fraud, waste, and abuse, but when you have a fractional reserve banking system, this inevitably happens. And we need to get off of it, and we need to go back to a gold standard. That's why all this gold's flying back to the United States, because the tokenization's coming where we can stamp it with a QR code. Now we know where everything is, who's got what. There's no more rehypothecation. We can get rid of the fraud inside of the stock market, inside of the commodities, futures, everywhere else with tokenization. But we have to have a format for what type of stable coins that we're going to have, or CBDCs or whatever, from a foreign country, because it's banned here. Thank you, Trump. In order to create this stable unit of account and to stabilize exchange rates in 3 to 5 seconds instead of 3 to 5 days with the leverage. So this whole thing's coming down, people. It's coming down.
Is a conflict in your mind with China at some point inevitable? We've heard people come on the news and they say a conflict is within 5 to 7 years. Pentagon runs a study that says within 5 to 7 years. Now, some of this seems like it is based on the need for more money and more spending and more Or is this, and you know more about China than a lot of people, and you've studied and read about it, is it going to be military conflict? Is it going to be an economic conflict?
In this is the book, and I'll get you a copy. Unrestricted Warfare, written by two colonels back in the 90s off of the Gulf War. And what they said is foreign devils are so sophisticated in armaments, and particularly remote armaments and targeting, that we never want to get into a shooting war with foreign devils. That unrestricted warfare will be cyber, psychological, political, economic. We will do everything. And in fact, they announced in 2019 there's a people's war. The Chinese Communist Party is at war with us today. That's where you see the mass infiltration into the United States. That's where you see the taking of so much of our technology. We don't need, and Sun Tzu tells them in their belief.
And it went into our intelligence agencies. We've been fully usurped by the Chinese Communist Party, by the Western the Western elites, the cabal, if you will.
The moment they have to go kinetic, they feel they've already lost. Number one, they don't want to fight the foreign devils in a kinetic war because they understand one thing we can do is get up on it and fucking blow shit up and kill people, okay? We're very good at that. They consider...
Problem is, though, and Ukraine has taught us this, that armored vehicles and, ships and stuff, old tech, it's outdated now with the advent of drones and... a lot of this different stuff. Like, for instance, Ukraine would keep doing these invasions into Russia. They would keep trying to do these incursions in there. And I remember, the first beginning months, like 6 months into the Ukraine war, everyone was making fun of Russia for bringing in these old T-72 tanks and stuff and being like, ha ha, you guys are losing so many things. You have to bring in all this old fucking tanks and shit to supplement with your losses. They changed tactics. Instead of, we're going to just do armored columns into a city that are just perfect targets, we're going to just hold these tanks back, elevate it up to 45 degrees, and use it as artillery. Because artillery, for 600 years, is the king of the battlefield and always will. Dumb artillery. It's just a war of attrition at that point. How much does an artillery shell cost versus a drone? And if you cannot consolidate gains with your army, it doesn't matter what you do at that point. Dumb artillery will keep grinding you up, and it's basically World War I style tactics now because of the technology change that's going on. So on the one hand, he's correct. On another, he's not, because the technological innovations that are going on, we saw it all play out in Ukraine.
That defeat. They want to defeat us beforehand. My point. The only people that throw off, think about that, we allow the Chinese Communist Party, which is a dictatorship that's killed 250 million of their own people, right? I mean, they make Stalin and Hitler look like pikers, okay? They've murdered in concentration camps, starvation, through the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, the collectivization, and today the gulags they have, 250 million of their own people. And the forced abortions, you had another 300 or 400 million Chinese, particularly Chinese female babies. So these people are murderous dictatorship, yet we interact with them, we're in business with them like they're part of the Kiwanis Club. If you want to support Lao Beijing, which is the only way they can be overthrown, that's a name for old old 100 names, because there's basically 100 names in the Chinese language, right? 100 last names. And so old 100 names is a term for the common man in China, common man and woman. If you want Lao Beijing to overthrow him, we just have to do two things. You cut them off completely from any access to American capital. And I mean any. No stock market, no equity, no lending, no nothing, zero. And you cut them off 100% from American technology. They will collapse, I believe, in 100 days. They cannot exist unless they have access to American capital or access to technology. This is why I'm one of the leaders of the decoupling effort, right? And President Trump, he wrote an executive order on Friday and signed it. That's probably the toughest thing we've done about no involvement at all with technology companies of any company that does Chinese military. It's the first time somebody's put down the law. That's the way you take care of the Chinese Communist Party. If we don't do that, I believe we'll be in a shooting war in the South China Sea and around Taiwan in 5 years. And people have to understand, I don't care about your moral, whether you think you're supporting Taiwan for a democracy or not. Advanced chip design, 30 to 40 to 50% of our advanced chip design comes from Taiwan. There's chip, and it's not easily replicable. The Koreans have tried it. The Japanese.
They did that for a purpose, so they knew everybody in the world would want to prevent China going into Taiwan. It was a national defense type thing. Like it was brilliant what they did in Taiwan to create this integral industry to the entire world economy and put it on this little fucking island. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Japanese have tried it. We're trying it here in the United States with the CHIP Act. We are 10 or 20 years away from those plants. Advanced chip design is both an art and a science. We don't have it. They have it in those plants in Taiwan. It's 80 miles from the mainland China. It's a horrible situation. President Trump thinks about it all the time. You talked about the Pentagon. And that's where I spent half of my career at sea was there. The other half was in the North Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf. So I've steamed those waters. Right now, there's not been a war game in the Pentagon. They put this out in the last 7 or 8 years that we've won defending Taiwan.
Wow.
Right? Which is why in the past 2 years or so, we have now went to these old World War II airstrips that we had as the island hopping campaign went on, and we built these airstrips to go and bomb the shit out of fucking Japan. We've now started recommissioning all of those fucking airfields. Do you know how fucking nuts that is? That 70s. That's how real the threat is. That we are starting to recommission all of these fucking airfields and all these little isolated islands and everything. That's how we are militarizing the first island chain. That's what MacArthur referred to it as our first line of defense, basically. So this is crazy. That's what's going on. Everyone needs to pay attention to this.
And they know that. So, and if they take Taiwan, the American economy will drop into a depression. They understand that. That's why it's kind of a standoff right now. But we have to get much more aggressive on the CCP or we're going to pay for it. And we do that by restricting Wall Street and restricting Silicon Valley from being in business with them.
The salutes that Elon, I think, might have done one by mistake, or you did one, these things that people are getting very upset about. You just got a lot of press at
oligarchs kicking him off everywhere. It was his base that said, fuck this. If you're in, we're in. And when he said, I'm in, understanding, and this was the greatest moment of moral clarity and one of the greatest profiles in courage. You take Kennedy's book, read them all 8 examples. I think you got 10 examples. They don't compare to Trump. Trump understood, if I do this and are not a good little boy and stay in Mar-a-Lago and build more golf courses and write my memoirs, if I come back and try to reclaim the presidency that was stolen from me, they will try to throw me in prison. They'll try to bankrupt me. They'll try to destroy my country. He understood.
Maybe they'll try to kill you.
And eventually try to kill you. He is the American Cincinnatus. This is his famous mythical Roman general that went back and retired. And when the nation was having a crisis, right, in a war, they went to him and said, you got to come back and save us. Trump came back, and that's why it's General Washington, Lincoln, and Trump. This will be known as the age of Trump. And here's the thing. They're not in history. They're not going to give a fuck about Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance. They're going to care about Donald Trump and MAGA. They're going to say this guy was a billionaire that came and basically formed a populist nationalist movement that gave the country its sovereignty back and gave the country its freedom back. And that's why I think he's not only one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, he's one of the 2 or 3 greatest Americans we've ever had. And this is why I'm a huge proponent of trying to see if he can't stick around as long as possible. Because, at least for another term after this, because...
Well, that would require amending the Constitution.
Well, we'll see about that. We'll see. No, but then people
You don't think he'll be too old?
You don't certainly won't be too old. Look at his energy now. His energy is
great energy.
Great energy and sharp. Listen, a guy like this comes along once a century.
Sure.
We had one in the 18th century.
But he'd have to win again, right? I mean, let's say you would be another election.
Yes.
Because this is what people tend to always say about,
No.
Right?
He would winning more elections. We're not concerned about that. We think that this guy is on a roll right now. We think we're building our coalition. Now we have to deliver, right? Yeah. There's going to be some people should understand.
You have to deliver.
Next 3 or 4 months are going to be a firestorm on this Capitol about spending, about taxes, and I'm a big proponent that if we can't cut spending enough, If there's not enough revenue coming in from tariffs,
you're going to tax the rich.
You're
Steve Bannon, tax the rich.
I said in the Oval in 17 when you had Gary Cohen, Mnuchin, and Jared, myself, and I told the president then, you got to take the upper bracket and we got to tax him. We got to increase the tax rates.
What's the upper bracket?
Well, here's what I'm saying is that right now.
Where does that start before I get on board with this?
Hang on. You're probably going to fall into that.
No.
Right now, if you look at
Steve,
if you look at the $4 trillion,
these private planes are expensive and they're dangerous.
If you look at the $4 trillion, so if we don't extend the tax cuts, right, there's basically, as Scott Best said, there's a $4 trillion tax increase coming. If you take couples filing together under $400,000 combined, that is essentially 2.6 trillion of that. Okay, so that covers, and I would actually say increase that maybe to 500,000. Then you have a couple $100 billion for pass-throughs of entrepreneurs with small companies. That leaves about $1 trillion for the top 5% or the top 3%. And those tax cuts would not be renewed. Their taxes would go back to the previous taxes.
39.
Yes, and I'm actually saying that.
And I could get behind. I could say that's okay.
I appreciate that.
I mean, I'm just saying.
I think.
Is there any way we could start taxes after $8 million?
Well, they do that now. I think on estate taxes. And let me give you one more piece of news though. That's in the existing taxes we have today. So I'm a proponent of President Trump is too. No tax on tips.
Yes.
No tax on overtime. No tax on first responders, military, veterans, etc.
Podcasters.
Right-wing podcasters.
Okay.
No tax on Social Security. That adds up. When you accumulate it, that's about another $1 trillion.
Okay.
So our gap goes from 2 to 3 trillion.
Gotcha.
And so we got to close that.
Got to close it. There should be no income tax, okay, on private individuals. Negotiable on businesses, because we have deficits to make up for. But if they get the strategic stockpile to grab the rest of that escrow of XRP, not only do they benefit from the price appreciation of the tech, which that tech, it value floats on the ability of the transactions. Okay, it's volume, frequency, and amounts. To handle it, it must float with it. Okay, so the increases in price means it can handle more transactions without taking up all of the network. So if they get if they get all of that escrow as part of the strategic reserve, not only do they benefit from yields that you can make off of processing every one of these transactions, but also the price appreciation, which is another argument against having Bitcoin in the strategic stockpile. How much more price appreciation can we get from people having faith in it rather than an actual use for it? We could pay off the debt really fucking quick if we grab all that escrow, put it into the strategic stockpile, benefit from the price appreciation because it's settling all of the transactions in the world, which is $7 trillion a day, just in straight up money. We're not even talking about derivatives. We're not talking about anything else.
And my point is, the best way to incentivize the oligarchs and the wealthy and the lords of easy money on Wall Street to help us cut spending is they've got to get in back of, because the puppets here in D.C. respond to those guys. You've got to have your lobbyists. You've got to have everybody help us work on cutting spending. If we can't cut spending, we can't continue on at $2 trillion deficits. Not only may you not get, in my view, not get the extension of the...
It's something about the deficit. A deficit is a shortfall. You don't have enough money coming in to pay for all your spending. So what's the solution that they always do? They run to the Fed to print it up, creating inflation, which is a tax.
Tom, tax cut, I think you got to talk taxes on financial transactions, taxes on you got to kill the carried interest.
Taxes on financial transactions. Taxes on financial transactions using XRP. External Revenue Service, cross-border payments. This is the way.
You have to kill
the
all
carried
these
interest
gains.
they should have killed a long time ago.
They
No one's killed it.
No one's killed
Chuck
it.
Schumer and everybody.
It's not. And by the way, the Democrats always fold. Remember,
Democrats fold.
In the first 100 days, to show what funnies there are, in the first 100 days of Biden's regime, they came out with all this tax on billionaires. Remember that? They had a program of tax on billionaires. It never even got through a committee. They just, because the Democratic Party is controlled by billionaires. And so this is, I think, where we got to get tough. I just saw a poll today that 50% of Republican voters, President Trump's supporters, 50% agree that if we got to close this gap, that they support taxing the wealthy. I think it's just going to happen, and to me, it's just logical.
I'm not against it, and I think that we should care for. I've always said, listen, I lived in California for many years, pay high taxes, and I said if I was living in a place where it was nice, and people were being supported and cared for with the money, it's great. But if I'm paying 13.5% of my money and someone is using the bathroom in the middle of the parkway, I'm asking questions.
Like Bill Maher and others. So finally started to wake up to the fact after the Palisades debacle of exactly what you're paying for. Listen, I'm not for higher taxes. What I'm for is fiscal sanity. Right. We're in a financial crisis. If we can't, if President Trump's geoeconomics on tariff, because
if you're not for higher taxes, we need to find an alternate source of revenue. What is a better alternate source of revenue than utilizing a tech that settles transactions that we can take a yield off of, whose value floats with the use of it, which means, as I said, the more transactions that occur over the network, the higher the price must be to handle that volume. So not only do we take the yields, we also benefit from the price appreciation from the spin up to handle all the fucking transactions. So this is the alternate form of revenue, and the ERS can be the one that collects the taxes, either the yields from the strategic stockpile, or just straight up taxes on whatever financial institution that's using this XRP to do this transmission of value cross border.
He doesn't think of tariffs as a 25% tariff on a Mexican avocado or some under the hood part from Canada. He looks at it as we have a premium market that's basically supported and made robust by working class people. You have to, if you want to get through the golden door, you got to pay a premium. Like you get a skybox at a sporting event or a front row ticket to a concert. You either move your manufacturing here and create jobs, or you're going to pay a price for it. He believes, I think, like Navarro, eventually a third of our total revenue can come from external sources, not internal. But if we can't, cut spending, get more duties, fees, and tariffs from outside sources, that gap at $2 trillion is not sustainable, and it's just going to keep driving inflation. It's got to be cut. If you want to get under $1 trillion, and Doge doesn't come up with those types of cuts, which I think right now is still to be seen. There is waste, fraud, and abuse, but if we can't get to those cuts, eventually you have to get additional revenues. Those revenues, to me, should come from financial transactions, carried interest, others, and obviously the wealthy that can have made out so well from the 2008 collapse. I mean, we've created more wealth for them. The Wall Street Journal today just has a report out that the entire economy, 70% of it is or a third of the purchasing power, but 70% of the overall is driven by the top 3%. People making more than $350,000 a year, I think. That's not, we can't continue into that system.
That makes sense.
We have a capitalist system.
We got to keep it.
Well, we have a capitalist system with no capitalist.
Right.
Think about it.
Right.
70% of the people in this country.
It's not a capitalist system if you have these partnerships between them and the government. That's not capitalism. That is not. That's crony capitalism. That's corporatism. That's a form of almost socialism right then and there, because you have this partnership with the government to protect these companies which should fail, these banks that should fail. So we don't have capitalism. None of this is capitalist that's going on here with all these government programs being involved in the economy. He knows this. Why aren't you saying it? I don't get it.
Country don't own financial or real assets, right? They have to have a piece of the action. If you have everybody a piece of the action, and this is not socialism, they're not, these people.
What's a better piece of the action than owning a money processor that is handling all of the transactions in the world. That's how we get the fuck out of this, man.
No, this is fairness.
It's also practical. President Trump keeps saying it's a revolution of common sense. Common sense means let's get everybody to be a capitalist. Let's get everybody to be an owner of something. Financial assets, real assets.
Digital assets!
Care about their community.
Care about the community.
Digital asset, bro. You need to be able to... It needs to have a good company behind it that is compliant with everything, that has licenses, that has the relationships, that understands the spreadsheet fucking problems that these goddamn institutions are dealing with, and you can generate a yield off of it and have a benefit of the price appreciation, and it settles in 3 to 5 seconds, which increases the velocity of money, which also gets rid of the idea of a reserve currency as well, of collapsing the Fed, getting rid of the need for the fucking CIA because everybody has their self-determination back again. This is how much more common sense can we be?
Once you incentivize people with actual ownership, you create a capitalist system. Right now, we have a oligarchic system.
Yes.
Right? It's very huge government, a handful of players in each industry, whether it's media, whether it's defense contracting, whether it's big pharma, health, the oligarchs in Silicon Valley that have elite merger or elite capture, right, or regulatory capture. This has to be broken apart, and they're just not going to sit there and say, oh, this is brilliant. Why didn't we think of that? We'll just toss you the keys. Every day is going to be a fight.
It will.
And we're asking people in your audience, as you become awakened to what reality is, understand they're always going to try to throw, oh, it's Nazi salutes, or these guys are nativists, or they're racist. We're anything but. We're saying that the greatest resource this country's ever had, is its people, particularly working class and middle class people. It is what has created more value, more wealth, freed more people than any nation in the history of the earth. And what we have to do is make sure that they're incentivized and rewarded for that. And if we do that, this thing is going to thrive like nobody's business.
Steve Bannon, thank you so.
Completely agree. Now we just need to have people be invested into the system, but not this one. The new one that's coming. Just describe for you the text, Steve, and take a look at it. Understand its power, its use, what it means for the rest of the world, how the United States can benefit from it. And then, Bob's your uncle.